I don't care. That's fine. He can sit. He can sit. That's fine. No, he has to stand and paint. Hey, did you guys like that?
Make up for not wearing it.
Oh, I had
Tell him to make
what it was. I had a Lions Club event on the same day that I had a
They just gotta make the
event
things
recently, and I had to take over
My office is smoking out. Packed house, man.
with the what? All right.
I've
We have a
been
quorum, don't we?
against that logo
We have a quorum, don't we?
the entire time I've been on the board. We've got one golf course. Do not, I mean,
Call the meeting to order.
think about the leasing value.
Call the roll.
Trustee Fenton.
Here.
Trustee Dodge.
Hey, good to see you, brother. Yeah, here. Sorry, you heard that, right? Hey.
Trustee Guerra.
Here.
Trustee Ruzick.
Here.
Trustee Calandrello.
Here.
Trustee Carroll.
here.
Mayor Pico.
Here.
Please rise for the pledge.
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could everyone stay standing for just a minute and observe a moment of silence for all those in the Carolinas that are dealing with flooding and issues right now? Thank you. Please be seated.
You guys want some more?
Yeah.
Sure.
Please.
Approval of September 4th, 2018 regular meeting minutes.
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Fenton.
move to approve the minutes of the Board of Trustees meeting of September 4th, 2018.
Second.
Are there any changes? Call the roll.
Trustee Fenton.
Aye.
Trustee Guerra.
Aye.
Trustee Dodge.
Aye.
Trustee Ruzick.
Aye.
Trustee Calandrello.
Aye.
Trustee Carroll.
Aye.
Mayor Pico.
Aye.
Approval of September 10th, 2018 special meeting minutes.
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Ruzick.
I move to approve the minutes of the Board of Trustees special meeting of September 10th, 2018. Second.
Any changes? Call the roll.
Trustee Ruzick.
Aye.
Trustee Guerra.
Aye.
Trustee Fenton.
Aye.
Trustee Dodge.
Aye.
Trustee Calandrello.
Aye.
Trustee Carroll.
Aye.
Mayor Pico.
Aye.
Orland Park A's Fast Pitch Organization raffle license.
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Guerra.
I move to approve issuing a raffle license to the Orland Park A's Fast Pitch Organization to sell raffle tickets during their Trivia Night fundraising events scheduled for Friday, November 9th, 2018.
Second.
Any questions? Call the roll.
Trustee Guerra.
Aye.
Trustee Carroll.
Aye.
Trustee Fenton.
Aye.
Trustee Dodge.
Aye.
Trustee Ruzick.
Aye.
Trustee Calandrello.
Aye.
Mayor Pico.
Aye.
Honor perfect ACT score recipients.
So tonight we have two perfect ACT score recipients, and for those of us who had to take the ACT, you know what an achievement that is to get a 36 out of 36 on your ACT. Hopefully it's leading to some good scholarship money for you and your parents. So I'm going to call each of these individuals up, and I'll meet you up in front. Carson Kroll of Carl Sandburg High School.
Yeah, there you go.
So, Carson Kroll of Carl Sandburg High School presented in recognition of earning a perfect score of the American College Test, the ACT. You're among an elite group of 0.136% of students nationwide who earned a perfect score. Presented this day, 17th day, September 2018. Congratulations. Great.
You funded it, so.
Thank you.
Aristotle Benicos.
I love Boston, so Harvard MIT out there would be awesome.
There you go.
Great, and I know Aristotle because they actually caddied for me several times over Christmas tree. So not only is he a great student, but he also is a hard worker, hustling back and forth to get to the Christmas tree to caddy and make our mini bucks. But hopefully this will help so that you're not spending money and you're still paying for us. Aristotle Vinicos of Carl Sandburg High School presented in recognition of your earning a perfect score of the American College Test, the ACT. You are among an elite group of 0.136% of students nationwide who earn a perfect score, presented the 17th day of September 2018. And by the way, Mr. and Mrs. Vinicos very appropriately named.
Consent agenda?
Consent agenda. Item A, payroll for September 7th, 2018. Item B, accounts payable for September 5th through September 17th, 2018. Item C, acceptance of the fiscal year 2017's comprehensive annual financial report. Item D, OPEB trust fund agreement and investment policy approval. Item E, amending Title 8, Chapter 6 of the Orland Park Village Code regarding unauthorized presence in schools. Item F, disposal of village property, tasers, ordinance. Item G, ordinance amending Title 8, Chapter 2 of the Village Code to authorize a $50 administrative booking fee for prisoners. Recommended ordinance amendment. Item H, Melrose Pyrotechnics contract renewal 2019 and 2020 approval. Item I, all the expansion ordinance. Item J, Palos Community Hospital South Campus redevelopment planned unit development ordinance. Item K, land development code amendments to ordinance. Are there any changes to the consent agenda? I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Calangelo.
I move to approve the consent agenda item A through K.
Second.
Call the roll.
Trustee Calandrello?
Aye.
Trustee Carroll?
Aye.
Trustee Fenton?
Aye.
Trustee Dodge?
Aye.
Trustee Guerra?
Aye.
Trustee Ruzick?
Aye.
Mayor Pico?
Aye.
Public hearing?
So now we're going to enter into a public hearing for the Village of Tallgrass annexation public hearing, and Attorney Fricker is going to comment.
Need to make a motion first. I move to adjourn the public hearing on the annexation agreement for the property located at 10851 West 167th Street. Adjourn to the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All against? So, motion carries 7-0, and we are entered into the public hearing.
For members of the board and the public, this is a public hearing required by law on any annexation agreement. This pertains to a development known as the Villas of Tallgrass. It's an 11-acre parcel at 10851 West 167th Street. It is proposed to be developed as a 22-lot residential subdivision, which subdivision includes stormwater management area, park site, and rights-of-way, and is to accommodate a 38 duplex units under the R4 residential zoning district. The annexation agreement has been prepared and on file with the village clerk's office for public inspection, and notice of this hearing has been given in the Orland Park Prairie as required by law. So any comments or questions or concerns should be brought up now at the public hearing.
Are there any comments or questions from the public? Any questions from anyone on the board? I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to close the public hearing on the annexation agreement for the property located at 10851 West 167th Street.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All against? Motion carries.
Replacement police vehicle purchase?
Pardon me? Oh, Public Works, sorry. Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Fenton.
move to approve waiving the bid process and approve purchase, of one 2019 Ford Utility Police Inceptor AWD from Curry Motors of Frankfort, Illinois, utilizing the Suburban Purchasing Cooperative Pricing in amount not to exceed $27,915.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Fenn.
the reason this went from committee to the board is that the police department was awarded a $30,000 grant for their road safety. And so we are under a timeline. We have to have this car purchased by the 21st of September, and the $30,000 will completely outfit the entire inside of the squad car.
Makes sense to me. Any other questions or comments? Call the roll.
Trustee Fenn.
Aye.
Trustee Guerra.
Aye.
Trustee Dodge.
Aye.
Trustee Ruzick.
Aye.
Trustee Calandrella.
Aye.
Trustee Carroll.
Aye.
Mayor Pico.
Aye.
Final report and presentation with Crashmore Group.
So now DJ is going to give us a presentation, and what I'd ask the board members to do is just hold off on questions till he's finished, so we don't interrupt it, and then we'll talk about the first portion, which is our existing fields, and then we'll talk about the second portion, which is the potential for a complex in the future.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, DJ, former Major League Baseball player, if it's okay for him to sit, if you guys don't mind. He's got
Okay.
some bad knees.
Yep, got it.
Okay, DJ?
Not a problem.
Go ahead.
Hey, thanks, man. First of all, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate the opportunity to present today. My name is DJ Wabick, and I work for Crashmore Consulting. The report that was submitted over is extremely extensive. It could take a long time to actually go through in detail, so I'm going to try to give a quick 10 to 15-minute overview, and then just open it up to question and answer. So first of all, Crashmore Consulting is a diverse consulting company that specializes in anything from loan workouts, troubled debt negotiations, to athletic consulting. Individually, I specialize in athletic market and have an extensive background from playing at a professional level to working on athletic development projects such as this, to working with different sports associations, both domestically as well as internationally. Crashmore was engaged with the Village of Orland Park to complete two things.
So we want to advance it. Down arrow.
There we go. First and foremost, an analysis of three of Orland Park's current athletic facilities, which included the John Humphrey, the Centennial Park, and Catchy Park locations, and the economic merit of potential upgrades and/or expansions with a $500,000 budget in mind. And two, the economic feasibility and regional, national demand for the Village of Orland Park to build a new athletic complex and the economic impact of said project. When looking at the economic merit of potential upgrades to the John Humphrey complex, Centennial Park, and the Catchy Park locations, we focused on four key factors. First, the current quality of the facilities. Second, the current residential rental policies. Third, the current usage rates at each facility. And four, the current facility footprints. With those 4 points in mind, all three agreed upon complexes are in need of facility upgrades. Both Centennial and Humphrey need fencing replaced, backstops upgraded on their baseball and softball fields, and all three facilities in need of playing surface upgrades. Second, the current residential policies and timeline of the release of the schedule put serious constraints on the ability for the village to bring in third-party events with the goal of creating outside spending within the village. The policies is within the field usage order of priority on the projector are too vast, which allow for far too many teams, clubs, and organizations to fall within the residential hierarchy, which take away from third parties that would like to bring outside events to the village. The policy caters towards residents, which it absolutely should, but the vast nature of the policy allows far too many organizations to claim residency, and the overall policy results in all premier weekends being rented by some level of resident that pay far below average market rates. Third-party organizations, especially within the peak of the season, will pay top dollar for sole facility usage on a given weekend, which will be between $80 to $150 per game slot, depending on the quality of the facility. The second potential issue with the current rental policies is the time frame in which non-rented dates are made available for non-residential rentals. In order to bring in third-party rentals, which will be the groups that will help drive economic spending, a field needs to have their open dates made available to potential third parties at no later than 6 months in advance of the start of the season. Currently, the village makes their open dates available in January to third-party rentals, with the season starting in April. In addition, no dates are available at any of the facilities for rental until July, which is after the core of the season. After dissecting the current quality of the facilities, the residential rental policies, and usage rates, Crashmore analyzed current facility footprints at each of the three proposed locations. Centennial Park's current footprint was created with a resident-first mindset and not a sports-first mindset, as evident by the walking paths, separation of fields, water parks, and additional amenities. Baseball and softball fields 1 through 5, which do have the bones to be a desirable facility with the pinwheels set up around a concession, drastically sloped fields, which take a substantial amount of money to correct. In addition, the fields are surrounded by walking paths and parking lots, which would make any potential expansion to Centennial difficult. Baseball, softball fields 6 through 9, and all soccer fields lack the necessary direct amenity access to become a thriving sports facility. Coupling these points with a very heavy usage schedule of 75%, Creshmore does not recommend any of the $500,000 be spent updating Centennial, as any monetary give would not provide an equal return. Catchy Park, from a bird's eye view, does have the desired space needed in order to make upgrades to become the quality of a premier facility. However, the current footprint is not conducive for a high-traffic facility. In addition, to get Catchy up to the standards of a desirable athletic facility, $500,000 would not be near enough. Catchy Park sits in the middle of a residential areas with extremely limited parking. Potential upgrades to Catchy geared towards driving spending in the community would mean that the facility would become far more populated and need not only the necessary infrastructure such as lights, concession stands, and bathrooms in place, but these additions would also add a lot of noise and light pollution to the surrounding neighborhoods. In addition, there would need to be drastic parking and road work upgrades, as there is currently only one parking lot. The John Humphrey Complex is the facility of the three that most closely resembles a footprint with a sports-first mindset. Humphrey currently has 6 fields, with the adjoining property, High Point, has additional 5 fields. Humphrey has a setup conducive to hosting athletic events, with fields 1 through 4 being lighted, as well as having easy access to amenities such as concessions and bathrooms. In addition, Humphrey currently has a lower usage rate than Centennial, with it being a little over 50%. With these 4 driving factors in mind, Creshmore has concluded that with the current allocated $500,000, the full amount of money would be best suited to be put towards the John Humphrey Complex to allow for both a better quality athletic facility for residential usage, along with having a facility within the village that would become more desirable to third-party renters. Creshmore recommends that fields 2, 3, and 4 at the John Humphrey Complex could be renovated into adult-sized fields. Adult-sized fields are in high demand by area tournament organizers and can be a significant revenue generator for the village. We recommend that the funds be utilized to make improvements to the infield and outfield playing surfaces and to replace backstops, which will bring the facilities more in line with competitive facilities and user demand. Fields 1 and 6 can be reconfigured to accommodate 70-foot base lengths, which would improve versatility by allowing the flexibility to fit more age groups and expand usage from the currently 8 and under events all the way up to 12U. All fields require improved fencing to ensure spectator safety and provide a more appealing field design. All fields need improvement to playing surfaces. We're also proposing to eliminate the John Humphrey Field 5 to allow for the necessary expansion of John Humphrey Field 6 and to approve and fence High Point Field 11. In addition, there are a couple of points to stress. We were given a $500,000 budget and therefore did not have enough room within the budget to add irrigation. But we do recommend the village do so. This will increase overall cost by approximately $50,000. We are proposing that all 6 fields have clay infields, as clay will allow for the flexibility in peg lengths to host multiple age groups of teams and provide necessary dimensional flexibility. In a nutshell, when you take fields 1 and 6 and look to expand the base lengths to 70-foot base lengths, we are proposing to keep still 55 and 60-foot base lengths. This provides residents with flexibility in order to still host 8 and under events while allowing to bring in 12 and under events as well. If the village is going to make the proposed and necessary updates to Humphrey, Creshmore recommends keeping an allotted amount of weekends open during peak season to third-party events in order to begin to align Orland Park as a player within the youth landscape and begin to create spending in the village. We'd recommend using Centennial as the primary place for residential usage while using Humphrey as a way to run revenue during events. Currently, what we found is there are certain weekends where residential usage is maybe starting at 2 p.m. on a Sunday, and it drives away outside renters from coming in. We are not saying eliminate residential usage at the facility, rather set aside key weekends with the hope of driving additional revenue. That revenue can then be used for updates of other facilities or reinvested into multiple areas within the community. Oh, wrong way here. The second task that Kretschmer was asked to accomplish was determine the viability of a new sports complex if 75 acres of undeveloped land was available within the village. First, the demand is here. The Village of Orland Park sits in a premier location in Illinois, has the proper infrastructure and access, and the youth sports market has grown over a $15 billion market domestically alone in 2018. As Kretschmer was doing their analysis and demand for a regional sports market, there was little doubt that Orland Park could become a thriving sports hub. And we as a group wanted to make sure that any proposal was thought out and that the project was strategic and, more importantly, sustainable for the village. With that being said, Kretschmer is proposing an 8-field, all-turf diamond complex. We believe that the complex should be set up in 2 pods of 4, with 1 pod lighted, the entire facility fully gated, with a concession stand scout tower located within the center of each pod. Kretschmer has designed the facilities with the goal of accomplishing the following. All turf facilities expand the season 2 more months to teams, knowing they will play regardless of weather. When you look at baseball and softball in a silo, typically teams seek out turf complexes specifically in March and April with the rain issues, with coming off of winter, potential snow and frozen ground issues. Anytime a turf facility is in March, April, May, typically fill a lot quicker on turf facilities, as well as expand your season into October. The baseball softball market is a low-hanging fruit, as a facility can run tournaments every weekend and with the right partnerships always be full. Baseball softball are very repetitive, meaning you can host a tournament every single weekend of the month. You can host a baseball the first weekend, softball second weekend, combine the third, combine the fourth. We are not saying do not bring in soccer, lacrosse, and those kind of events. We're simply saying that these fields can convert into soccer and lacrosse fields. You can create your sustainable cash flow through your baseball, softball events on a monthly basis while running soccer, lacrosse, and other sports as seen fit. This will allow the village to establish itself as a regional sports destination without the initial investment into soccer, lacrosse fields, and then when the demand arises, potentially begin a second phase to include soccer and lacrosse events only, without overextending yourselves. The next thing I quickly want to touch upon was the financials of the newly proposed athletic facility. With a strategic approach in mind, the proposed 8-field complex will cost approximately $8.5 million and need approximately 30 acres of land. I am personally not a financing person, but Kretschmer's analysts believe that there are multiple financing options, including tax-exempt bonding, public-private partnerships, and different types of governmental assistance, as well as additional supports. Any questions as they relate to anything of financing, I can answer after, and if I can't answer them, I can turn them around within 48 hours with our analysts. The last thing I wanted to do, and I know there's been a lot of information given, and I'd rather open it up, to question and answer, is quickly show a projected 5-year pro forma of the proposed facility. As you can see, we based the pro forma on a baseball and softball events only, with the majority of the events being 9 to 14U from April through June, entering into some high school events in July and August, and then showcase type events in the fall. This pro forma accurately reflects baseball and softball revenues based on Kretschmer's research as well as market awareness. With that said, we are not saying for the village not to run soccer and lacrosse. Rather, I wanted to show that a facility of this recommended size can be sustained through baseball and softball, and adding soccer, adding lacrosse, adding rugby, adding different kinds of festivals would only add to the value and strengthen the outline pro forma. I also want to note that we, as a consulting firm, are not land planners or developers, and all projected expenses are based off of similar sized projects that we've worked on. If a new facility like the one recommended is something that the village is interested in, then additional meetings would be required in order to capture the village's direction and vision. With that said, there are a million directions I could have taken this presentation. There's a ton of information in this report, and I figured it would probably be best to open it up to some question and answer.
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Dodge.
Just an initial question on your last slide. Yep. DJ. It looked like, we've been talking about this for a while, so glad you guys pulled this report together. As a board, we've talked about this as an amenity for the town to help support our retail and our restaurant, right? We feel like we're well located. I-80, Chicago, the market, the whole shot, right? This feels like these numbers are just from the facility itself, as opposed to trying to capture the net economic impact to the broader area or shops or restaurants and such, correct?
Correct. There is indirect spending and those kind of items in the report, but I did not include it in this presentation.
So before we go any further on the proposed new one, let's focus, as we talked about before, let's focus on the first part of the presentation, which was the 3 existing complexes. So does anybody have any questions for DJ on that, questions or comments on the first part of the presentation regarding Humphrey, Catchy, and Centennial?
Mr. Chairman.
Trustee Carroll.
DJ, when you talk about all 3 facilities needing some playing surface improvements, do you grade the playing surfaces as they currently exist, or is it just on or off? They need improvements or not?
They just in general need improvements. You know, you look at Humphrey and Centennial, there's a lot of wear and tear on it. I believe there's, some asphalt damages, there's some playing surface damages. They're obviously very workable right now, but if the goal is to obviously make it, a revenue creator for the village, there's going to be updates across the board. I do think that obviously redoing Humphrey and setting aside certain weekends and being able to generate some revenue, that money could be set aside for those upgrades, because I don't think it's significant unless wanting to take those facilities and really making them big regional hubs.
And I don't know if this question is for you or for staff or Trustee Calandrello, who's the chairman of Parks and Rec, but I just noticed one of your last comments was that the pro forma was all for baseball and softball. My understanding was the original study was to look at just what improvements to our parks had to be made, and John Humphrey is currently the only facility where we have a dedicated football field. Am I hearing your presentation correct, that your recommendations would be to take it just primarily to baseball, softball, and there's no recommendation as to football at that field?
Yeah, for me, we solely looked at the facility from the aspect of there's the baseball playing fields, the softball playing fields. I think that the football decision is something that is probably for the village. So if they wanted to plan it, they could. For us, it was simply looking at it from a field sport perspective and how to create the most revenue, whether it's changing some rental, whether it's bringing in outside events, so on and so forth.
Thanks.
Trustee Carroll, just to touch on that tournament aspect when we're talking about field conditions, perfect example is this weekend there was a large tournament at Centennial. Half of the other part of the tournament was based out of town, only because they weren't satisfied with the field conditions at John Humphrey. That's something that we want to bring back to Orland, to our facility, because the direct and indirect spending, not to mention the field rental for an entire weekend, is significant that we did not capture. And in regards to the overall report from Creshmore and from DJ, yes, we are taking into consideration the current footprint right now. Currently, we're waiting on the report from Creshmore, which we do now have with the recommendations, but also direction from the board and recommendations from the board as we move forward with draft RFPs for the dollars that the board has already set aside for the redevelopment of Humphrey.
Mr. Chairman.
Trustee Calandrello.
And when we were putting this together and talking with staff, we talked, and all the recommendations from Crushmore does not affect the ability for football to play there. They'll be displaced in 2019, but they'll have a home. They're able to have a home in 2020. The only effects of the remodeling or the recommendations of remodeling would be that some of the football field would have some infield gravel on it, so almost like a Oakland Raiders situation. But they would be able to come back to John Humphrey Complex if they chose to. So in all these recommendations, while it's focused towards improving our fields, much needed improvements to John Humphrey Complex, but it also doesn't displace our football needs. So that's something that we all talked about.
That's correct. That's how the report's written.
Any other questions or comments
Just
on this portion?
On this part, in terms of our existing, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just,
Trustee Dodge.
I certainly think that we need to work on our existing fields, and I guess as we kind of have the full conversation, so I fully agree that we need to put more money into our current facilities. What I haven't yet settled on is, do we do that with an eye towards getting started in the tournament business, so to speak, while we're working on a bigger project, or do we say, no, our parks, our kids, and then focus on the other facility, which potentially is an economic benefit to Orland, and some of that economic throw-off could then be used to make sure we absolutely have the best parks for our kids. So, I mean, those are interrelated. I haven't quite settled on how I want to see that, but I'm certainly committed to fixing our parks.
Trustee Garrow.
Gary's here, he can help with this, but how different does this proposal, how much does it differ from the staff proposal that we had last year for John Humphrey?
I don't.
It's to Gary.
Gary's right beside you.
It's very similar to the proposal that we brought forward to the board last year. However, it does touch on expanding some of the existing fields and eliminating one of the baseball fields.
And that was the one that's most problematic that we're not using this year, right?
No, it's not.
It's not that one?
It's not.
Okay.
That's field 3. The field, for lack of a better visual, is off of the bike path on the Heights.
It's for the two that are closest to the Village Hall, that are right next to one another, that pretty much because they're literally on top of one another, you can only put very young children on it. So you'd be expanding it to be more accessible for more age groups, essentially.
Right.
That's correct.
I mean, so as Trustee Dodge said, obviously our priority has to be our residents. And you discussed the fee schedules, and that would take a lot of discussion, because I know it took a lot of time to get it where it's at, and clearly our residents have priority. So outside tournaments, yeah, working with the different groups, it's possible to bring them in, but not to the detriment of our residents.
Yeah, I would agree to 100%. I mean, I grew up around here, so I'm fully conscious of residents, and that's not what the scope of the project is. We're simply saying, by looking at it, if you look at the usage rate at Centennial it's about 75%. You look at the usage rate at Humphrey, about 50%. It's what can we maybe tweak or do to not change those, but be able to better schedule. In other words, instead of being able just to go in and schedule in kind of a piecemeal format, how can we better streamline to also open up opportunity to create revenue at the facilities?
Sure, maybe identify certain weekends that we can take out of the
Exactly.
pool and let the groups consolidate their efforts. I
Exactly.
see that, but the rates, that still is going to be a sticky issue.
Any other comments on this portion?
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Calandrello.
I want to thank staff and the consultant we got on this issue. I think, as all the trustees have talked about, we want to help our kids. So I think it's one of the things where this is not a project that's going to be bankrolling us forever. I think it's a good thing that it's enhancing our kids' needs, but also opening up some possible revenue. So I don't think this is the bullet to make us the destination for the Midwest, but it helps our kids and then also helps a little revenue. So I think it was a good balance with that. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
So I'll make my comments just on this portion. So one, regarding the fee schedule, and yes, we did do a lot of work, but I know that I was coaching in 2000, and it's the same fee schedule essentially as we had then, and the same. So we probably, after 18 years, need to maybe take another look, because I do know back then the travel teams were 90-some% resident, and now that's changed. So again, focusing on our residents, not a team that is 50% our resident barely, or their whole program's 50% our residents. I think would be important. So it's something we should look at. They didn't make any recommendations on that, but clearly our fee schedule is a little out of whack, so probably something we should revisit after almost 2 decades. I can speak to, playing men's softball tournaments. You can run on 6 fields like this, you can run a 60-team tournament over the weekend, which is a lot of people coming in. And so, and those tournaments go into October. So there is some opportunity to start picking up some of these and becoming somewhat of a little destination where people know that we're here on just the Humphrey complex, because it is large enough, and it is, as they pointed out, laid out in a way that would be beneficial. And the nice thing is staff has already identified that, and the funding is reasonable enough. We already have the funding set aside to get that done. The other thing is, because it's only 50% occupied, and a lot of that reason is it's been 6 or 7 years since I've coached, and we stopped using Humphrey because our kids couldn't use it because it wasn't suitable for older kids. So it will help our residents too, because they'll have fields that are more flexible to use for more kids, and that will, when you're able to use those fields, now you will free up fields at Centennial for the younger kids. It just helps everybody. So having fields that are more usable for all age groups is just going to decrease the burden on everything else from a scheduling perspective. So thanks a lot for the work on that. And now if we want to talk about, so I think there's consensus amongst the board, because we've already approved it, to fix Humphrey Field. So I'm looking forward to see how that plays out. And then Triple Crown doesn't go to Midlothian to play some of its games as well. They stay here and play all their games. So if we want to talk about the new complex.
Well, Mayor Peak, I'll just make sure. So I think we're all in agreement. We're going to start investing in our local parks, and then with an eye towards fees and allocation of those parks so we could get started in the tournament business, right? So in priority order, it's us first and then to get started trying to attract tournaments. I just want to make sure I heard that correctly.
Correct. And personally, I think that's something to consider, like they did 18 years ago, is to involve our Parks and Rec, a group from our Parks and Rec Commission or advisory board to provide us some outside input, because we have people on there that are travel coaches and those types of things, so we can get those additional inputs, which I think would be helpful to get.
Regional marketing.
Yes, we'll engage all the groups and.
Well, that's why Jim Garrett's here, is for the regional marketing.
There you go.
And
I
will
looked
say,
in his direction, right?
Once we do get these fields upgraded, we are planning on to revisiting all the fees, the fee structure and the scheduling.
Okay, got it.
Anything on the new field complex?
Mayor Peacock, just
Trustee Dodge.
So I think all of us as a board have kind of been thinking about this idea for a while, so I want to get a little bit deeper in the details. And then I guess for the folks in the audience is we've, over time, tried to make sure that we do things for Orland Park as the economy itself moves less towards in-store retail, towards entertainment and other types of uses. We've got a healthy restaurant base. And when this idea came up, it seemed like a pretty good idea for us as an organization to look at something like a new complex to go after the tournament business. And, John, I think you could give testimony to how much money you've spent in other towns going around with your kids and travel. I think there's a lot of nodding heads in here. And it just seems to me, right, that close to two major highways, well located. We've got a lot going on in Orland for these families to do between games during the tournament for the entire weekend. You're close to a major metro area, so it just felt like we had a lot of natural advantages. The big challenge was always, would it work? Would it pay for itself, so to speak, however we get to the financing? And then how do you make it viable and how do you do this? And that's kind of what I heard in your report, that we are well situated and we can make this work. Is that the summary version?
Yeah, I think, the Chicagoland area in general lacks any kind of premier facility. When you look at the spring, the fall, most of our teams flood to Rockford, Peoria, Jacksonville, Indiana. And, the thought is if this is done, they would stay here. Why, especially those months, are you going to try to book hotel rooms and all these type of things in Rockford if you can stay in the Chicagoland area? So I think the location is perfect. For the Chicagoland area, I think it would be kind of the first premier type facility in the Chicagoland area. And I also think that by the design, it provides some sustainable type venue where you can create a name and you can create some branding for yourself and then decide if there needs to be some additional expansion or if that size is perfect, but it allows you not to get too big too fast.
So this, I think earlier, was essentially this complex could pay for itself if we run it well. And we put the work and energy in to building the business model so that it doesn't become a cost. What are the estimates for the direct? So, John, I'm going to sort of paraphrase you. First game's at 9 o'clock, and then you got like a 4 or 5 hour gap to your next game. Presumably, we can get you to buy lunch in Orland Park, or maybe go shopping or do some other things, right? So, do we have an idea for how much we might get for, I guess, would be indirect spending, a boost to our restaurants and our retail?
Honestly, it's in the report.
Okay.
Off the top of my head, I don't have it off the top of my head. I can dig
Page
back
31.
through there.
So page 31 of the report that you received, and I gave you a hard copy, it says annual indirect output and annual direct spending. So direct spending 4.6, annual indirect output 9.8.
All right, so can you guys tell everybody in the room and for the press exactly what we mean by those terms?
Yeah, so you'll have different money, especially when you start talking about indirect spending. It's what's in the village, maybe gas, maybe concession stops, those type of items for people when they're staying between games and not leaving the village. Annual direct is obviously direct from the actual venue, whether it be at the venue, so on and so forth.
You know, Trustee Dodge, to that point, and as the chairman had stated, Jim Garrett and Joel Kester from the Southland Convention Visitors Bureau, we engaged them just in discussion in the meeting. I don't know if you'd like to, did they walk out? No. If you have any questions of those two gentlemen.
I have a question. Mr.
Trustee
Chairman,
Rizek.
before we get that. So this is the direct
Revenue, yeah.
revenue, okay. So tell me how hotel vouchers would be
So
direct revenue.
any kind of complex now, as a service to basically the client coming in, usually has some kind of either housing company or travel arrangement. So when you enter into an event, you go through their housing policy. The venue and or the event organizer usually gets back about 10% per room night per stay for even hotels that are located not in the village. Typically, they're the same rate. There's no upcharge in them, but you know, companies have come in to do it to better organize as a service.
Okay. And merchandising, just apparel?
Yeah, tournament T-shirts, maybe little trinkets. We were very, very conservative on those type of costs, or I'm sorry, those kind of revenues.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Trustee Carroll.
I just want to point out that I was in favor of this type of an idea for several years. However, in April of 2017, we ran a referendum on our ballot. And while we just went through a situation showing the difficulties and quandary that sometimes referenda can cause when we're trying to make decisions, in this particular case, we ran a referendum in April of 2017 that asked the voters to vote on whether we should engage in a public-private partnership for the purpose of creating a multi-use sports facility. Sometimes referenda come back kind of close, within a couple hundred votes, but in that instance, it was a 2-to-1 against. The residents of Orland Park voted 2-to-1 approximately against creating this facility. Therefore, I personally cannot get behind any kind of amounts we're talking about to put together a facility based on that result.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Fenton.
In the report, you listed different ways to enter into something like this with private, you know, if we did it ourselves, if it went, you know, private, public, and if we went sponsorships, you listed in there the White Sox, the Cubs, and whomever else would be interested. What is the usual percentage that they go into with those partnerships, or have there ever been a sponsor or a developer out there that would come in and build the facility themselves where it wouldn't cost any village money?
Yeah, that's a pretty wide range of breakdowns that could, you know, happen. To me, it's about sorting the right agreement for the village. So I have seen some where outside people have come in and maybe the land, you know, is thrown in and they'll develop it for free. I've seen combinations depending on how the operations of the facility works. So I think that's one of those questions that, depending on if the village wanted to move forward or not, is kind of at a high level, what can it look like, and then how do we get there, and then we attack the right angles.
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Dodge.
Can you go to the page where you had financing options? Because I want to address, if I may, some of the points that Trustee Carroll brought up. So going forward, for everybody in Orland Park, this is a public meeting, right? Documentation's out there, so it's full disclosure, so there should be no hints or suggestion that we're kind of doing this under a basket. So here we are, and we could do it financed through the village. There's a revenue model, which we have to work on. There's a hell of a lot of work that has to be done before this is the case. You go through various public-private options, you look for different revenue streams, et cetera. So I, for one, would be happy to continue being a part of whatever team we assembled to look at this. And then, quite frankly, the check gate here is to take it back to the people of Orland Park fully informed. You know, Mike Carroll is right, Trustee Carroll, excuse me, is right, that we did have a referendum. I'd like to argue it was a poorly executed referendum where there was no site in place, there was no business model, there was no analytics, there was no data. So I'm, for one, am happy to put my name to an idea like this, to pursue it, bake the business model, take it back to the people of Orland Park to say, okay, if you got an opportunity to make an investment with the private sector in an asset that pays for itself, becomes a revenue stream to keep your parks at a phenomenal status going forward for your kids, and has a direct potential economic throw-off to support all that retail that we all lament is starting to wither up at the mall and put people in our restaurants. I'll take that risk any day, taking it back to the public.
Any other comments or questions? So I'll make closing comments on this item. So the report that we did, basically what it does is it directionally shows that financially this could make sense if we structure the right kind of deal. It's a long way from being anything that we would be implementing, because there's a lot of potential things you could do, public-private partnership, et cetera. Orland Park is a great place for these tournaments. As someone who does these tournaments every 6 weeks or 7 weeks, I can tell you I'd much rather come to a place like Orland Park than go to Columbus, Indiana. Nothing wrong with Columbus, Indiana. There's a nice military base down there. It's a nice drive. At least half of it's a nice drive. But there's 2 restaurants in the whole town. So we have a lot of benefits for that. The other thing is that one of the things we're trying to do is bring families to the area. Well, what signifies families? I mean, anyone here who's had children in sports knows how big travel tournaments are. If you can play some of those locally, it makes a big difference. So it will put, when people are coming here from other towns and say Indianapolis and they come to play and they go, well, I've got a new job in Chicago. Well, they've been in Orland Park. Now they want to come to Orland Park. So there's a lot of benefits to this from an economic perspective. Of course, anyone who's watched me for the last 16 or 18 months knows that I want to see a business model and a business plan behind this. So that's very, very important. So there's a lot of work to do, and it is part of economic development. So I would imagine, if Trustee Dodge is stepping forward, I certainly would be working hard on this as well and talking to people about it. But don't take this as, hey, this is some kind of a done deal, because there's a lot more to be done. To the referendum question, this is why we're a representative republic. These ideas are a lot more complicated than 2 sentences on a referendum ballot. And we've probably voted in the last 16 months, I bet you we voted on 12 or 14 things that went down 2/3 to 1/3 if we just tried to break them down into 2 sentences. And the board voted 7-0 because we have all of the detail. We have pages and pages of research and all of the information to make those decisions. That's why we do this. So thank you again for putting this together. Thanks staff for all the hard work on this. I think staff already had a pretty good sense of what needed to be done on the John Humphrey complex, but this already confirms that. It definitely identifies that there's more work to be done on the other complexes as well. And looking forward to looking at some of the potential opportunities in the future. So thank you.
Thank you.
And we don't have anyone signed in to comment tonight. Are there anybody that wants to speak publicly? Okay, board comments? Trustee Fenton.
I really have nothing to say, other than we do have an event this weekend that I'm sure Trustee Calandrella will talk about. It's called the Hoedown, and it's Saturday night from, 6 or 8?
Get
6
your
o'clock
tickets.
to 11 o'clock at Crescent Park, and tickets are available through Recreation. I think this proposal that was brought for us tonight gives us a lot of information, a lot of background information that we were lacking before, whether or not to pursue some type of partnership with this advanced fields. The only thing I think we're going to get hit is that we're not addressing football. So, and I'm a big football fan. Hopefully the Bears are winning, and that's it.
Trustee Calandrella, who, by the way, is wearing a Seattle Seahawks tie, for all of you who are noticing tonight.
Shame on you.
This is one of my favorite ties. This is my
point it
Monday
out.
tie, all right? No. I was going to say something before, but I thought, anyway, you had the last word, so I was going to beat you to it. Anyway, I just want to thank staff for all the hard work on the presentation today. I think it's a great talking point and things we could work on together, particularly John Humphrey, like I said, helping our kids today and possibly getting additional revenue would be helpful. So I want to thank staff for their hard work on that, and it's just the beginning. I know now Gary's got to do his work, so I appreciate that. And go Bears.
They're winning 0-7.
Trustee Ruzick.
No comments, Mr. Mayor.
Trustee Guerra.
I was happy to see the presentation from Crushmore. Like Kathy was looking for more football, I was looking for more soccer. I think we need to remember that that's a really growing sport and a little personal to me. Other than that, yeah, the event we have coming up this weekend, the Hoedown, I wish I could go. I'm going to be out of town, but I will want to know all about how it came out. So, go Bears.
Trustee Carroll.
Well, I've been enjoying the kind of truce we've had for the last probably 6 months or so, but in the last 30 days, it appears that campaign season must be starting up again because the mayor's blog posts, his supporters repeating those blog posts all over social media, fake news sites coming up and running, and illegal robocalls have started all over again. Some of the things that I have to point out only because they slander me, and more importantly to me as the finance chairman, they slander the hard work of our staff, our budget team that's been working diligently for the last few months on our budget cycle. First, there was a post on September 10th, which the mayor posted during regular business hours, a political post saying that I was the only one privy to a lot of the information that was presented to the board by the budget team, including the village manager. That is completely false. All of that information was information that had been previously provided to the board, and the board had asked them to go back and rework some numbers, which they did as requested. The mayor then went on to say that, quote, "We will have no reserves for 4 years, so this is a great progress." I don't know how having no reserves when you're running a government is great progress. Then the mayor says he thinks the direction that he's given staff was perfectly clear. Well, as the finance chair, I can tell you, I am not at all clear about the direction that our budget team has been given. They have come to me, multiple employees of the village administrative staff have come to me for direction because they can't quite figure out what it is they've been asked to do because the goalposts keep getting moved. The mayor's post goes on to say we agreed and directed staff to find $2 million in revenue and $2 million in cost cuts. The village staff then came back to us with options of several revenue streams or sources that truly did total $4 million for us to choose from at our discretion on an a la carte basis. However, the mayor's post kept saying that we were trying to commit the board to give us the full $4.3 million in revenue. That is completely a lie. If anyone wants to listen to the audio tape of those budget hearings, you will hear myself, you'll hear Finance Director Mampy, you will hear Village Manager Lamargo say multiple times that the board had asked the budget team to identify specific revenue sources, and the board even gave them those 4 or 5 sources to come back to us and tell us how much revenue individually they would each generate. Mr. Lamargo and his budget team did exactly what we asked them to do, and then the mayor put that out as that the staff and I were asking for all those revenues. Total lie. What I keep wondering is we keep on sending them back, come up with more cuts, come up with more cuts, and every time they come up with a cut, someone's got a problem with it. I'm asking the village mayor to stand up, the president, and to show some leadership to identify what cuts he's comfortable with, because every time the team comes up with a cut, there's a problem with it, and it hasn't gotten anything accomplished. We keep on asking them to cut expenses. We've had a process that this village has used for 20-plus years, where we talk about revenues, then we talk about operating expenses, then we talk about capital budget. It's just like when you do your home budget. You can't do a budget at home if you don't know how much money you make. We all have a salary or income that we anticipate, and we work a budget off of that. So certain people on the board would have you believe we're doing it backwards, but we need to know what we're operating with before we come up with a budget. Otherwise, we're not going to accomplish anything. And again, I would like to see the mayor step forward and give us some leadership. If he wants cuts, everything that the village staff has proposed has been problematic. I'd ask him to identify those cuts. He talks about the village manager making a unilateral decision to cut new programs. He's been asked, the village manager has been asked time and time again to come up with more and more cuts. He's still been asked at the last meeting to come up with another $500,000 in cuts. Yet tonight, we see that we need $500,000 towards our ball fields. And certainly when we are asked to come up with millions of dollars in operating expense cuts, I don't know how we can discuss throwing $600,000 at a concert. The mayor also asked on multiple occasions in his post why we're talking about operating and revenue during a capital budget discussion. Well, he was one of 2 or 3 people that kept bringing up those things in other hearings, speaking outside of the scope of whatever the hearing was supposed to be. Trustee Dodge recently made a comment which I agree with 100%, that we need to have a conversation with our residents about what our residents want from their government and how much they're willing to spend for it. That's the problem with doing a budget. We have to find out what the village residents want and budget accordingly. Unfortunately, the law requires us to have a budget done by December of each year. We can't put the budget out to referendum. When you elect your governmental officials, all 7 of us, as the mayor mentioned earlier, it's a representative democracy. We have to decide what we think is in the best interest of you, the residents of Orland Park. Trustee Calandrello made a comment about this not being the business of Orland Park, it being the Village of Orland Park. And the mayor took exception with that. I think I knew what Trustee Calandrello meant at the time, which is that there is a certain amount of government, and as he mentions time and time again, when you get your tax bill, only 6.9 cents on the dollar goes to the village. And I think as Trustee Calandrello pointed out, for an average home in Orland Park, you're paying $400 and some a year to the village, and that gives you all of the programs, the police protection, parks and rec, water, streets, everything, not water, streets, everything else that goes with being part of our village. That's all within the $400 a year or so you're paying to the Village of Orland Park. So when we talk about massive cuts, we're talking about, right now, you've heard probably, cutting the PACE bus program. That's one of the cuts that village staff identified. It's one of the things we could get rid of that doesn't impact public safety or some of the other things that we have to provide on a day-to-day basis. Well, right before I came in the boardroom tonight, I saw a group of disabled people from Orland Park that posted on Facebook how irate they are that we're talking about getting rid of their PACE bus program. We cut the Village Parkway leaf collection, and we immediately got a deluge of complaints from residents that have been using that service for years and years and years that are upset about it. We're trying to make everything be more cost effective, so we tripled the cost of renting a picnic table from our Parks Department. We got a ton of calls about that. Every time there's a cut out of that $400 or so a year that you're going to pay a year, we hear about it. So Trustee Dodge was right. What do we want to give you? What do you want us to give you, and how much do you want to pay for it? So it sounds great to say we're going to cut another $1 million here, but with that, it's going to go a lot of programs, concerts, or other things that you're accustomed to having in the Village of Orland Park. And I'd like you to think about that, because the stark reality is that we cannot meet our 20% fund balance policy without talking about revenue. That policy, in case you don't know, we have a board policy that says we'll always have 20% operating reserves. We have to do that. If we don't, when the mayor has posted, it's great that we don't have reserves for 4 years. If we don't have those reserves, it'll have extremely negative consequences to our bond ratings, to our financial grades that we get as a village. We have to keep that 20% up. There's no solution because of the falling retail sales tax that we can meet our budget with the 20% fund balance that we're required to keep without talking about revenue. So again, I'm asking the mayor to step up, show some leadership, show us which revenue sources you're okay with. Since every time Mr. Lamargo tries to bring it up or tries to get the board to commit, he's sent back to the drawing table to come up with more cuts, and also to show us which cuts that this board can live with, because my perception, as well as the people on staff I'm talking with, is that that goalpost keeps getting moved. I don't think it's fair to anyone. Thank you.
Trustee Dodge.
Back to the parks. This is an important idea for Orland, and I want to make sure that it's communicated well, Joe, so I certainly don't mind. There's nothing confidential in this report. Why don't we get it out there, put it up on the web as soon as possible? This needs to be a community dialogue. It's a big undertaking in terms of the work, and to make sure that we do this well, and I think it could have huge advantages for Orland Park, so this will take a while to pull off. But again, I'm committed to us first, meaning let's spend the money we allocated, I think, last year for some of the parks, and then let's get started in the tournament business while we're working on this one. And then, you know, Trustee Carroll, excuse me, sorry, going from familiar. Trustee Mike Carroll brought up a number of points, and that's, you know, this is how it goes, right? You have at it. I mean, politics is a contest of ideas. We've got some revenue challenges. I've not been happy for, a decade with some of the implicit assumptions in our cost structure growth. Been trying to get those capped for a long time, so it's a work in progress. And in terms of this budget cycle, it's going to be a little gnarly, but I think we'll get to a budget that hits all the objectives that we want. And then as we go through the next couple of years as a community, you know, what do we want to fund? We can continue to have great parks, but we also got to make investments like this to put people in our restaurants and our stores to pay for it all. To Mike's point, we've all known it. The magic money tree has been the mall. That's why your property taxes are relatively low as a percentage. If that's under threat, what are you going to do about it? Right? How do you address your cost structure? How do you bring in more revenue? How do you support your business base? So I think, Mike and I are broadly in alignment that we've got to have a broader conversation. It's going to take a series of discussions, not necessarily this budget cycle, to everybody in Orland Park gives us a clear signal. Leaves. Leaves is a perfect example. None of us wanted to cut the leaves program, but it wasn't cheap, and it was only benefiting 15% of the village. So the other 85% of us didn't get that service, and we, by definition, were subsidizing it. Could have been pennies, but it's explicitly a cross-subsidy. PACE. We were basically subsidizing PACE rides at the rate of $12 a ride. PACE itself as a system subsidizes rides at $4. We had to attack these things. Where it doesn't necessarily mean we've got perfect ideas, but that's kind of why, I don't think anybody should walk away thinking there's tension so much as this is not an easy problem to work through while we're passionately advocating for what we believe in an approach to government. So we'll get there. And then, we're going to keep working on this one because it's important for the town. Thank you.
Thank you. So my comments, I guess, to Trustee Carroll, since he brought these things up. Blog posts and robocalls, you should do a little bit more research before throwing those at me. Clearly, they attacked the gaming vote, and I voted for it as well. I'm also not for an aldermanic form of government. So that call was sent to me. I've heard there's 2 other calls. I can't stop people from making calls. I don't know who they are. We've been through this before. If you have a complaint with that, call the FCC, but I know nothing about it. Regarding the reserves, my point of view on the reserves, I never said it was good that we didn't have reserves. I said in 4 years our reserves would be below 0. And that chart was never shown to the public until my State of the Village. But my understanding is that chart has been around for about 4 to 5 years. I've been told that on more than one occasion. So that is why we have to make some fundamental changes. Because we do have a good reserve policy, but we have to make some changes in order to get those reserves, to keep those reserves at the levels that we want, which is exactly what we're trying to do. Regarding the direction and the expenses, the first board meeting was very clear, $2 million in revenue, $2 million in expenses. Trustee Carroll agreed to that. The last meeting, we saw $1.27 million of expense cuts, of which $350,000 was actually a funds transfer, not an expense cut. So the only cut that we did not agree to was a $7,000 cut to the Veterans Program, which would have cut the person who does our Memorial Day program, our Veterans Day program, our fish fry, our fishing derby, our Liberty Run, our just did our golf outing, and actually him with our Veterans Commission and other volunteers raised approximately $25,000 in the golf outing on Tuesday. So that was what I was going to talk about, which is they did a phenomenal job. Thanks to all of those volunteers who did a great job on a great day. Thanks for all of the staff, including several of the members of the staff here that showed up and played and supported that. Thanks to Trustee Gira for sitting on a hole, her and her husband. Thanks to Trustee Ruzick for coming to the dinner. Thanks to Dan Calandrello or Trustee Calandrello for purchasing a ticket. I know we probably got busy and couldn't make it, but that's okay. And then thanks to Trustee Dodge for playing in that as well. Ultimately, as I've said many times in the budget meetings, we have a lot of decisions to make. We have to make some changes. We have to make fundamental changes in our cost structure, and we have been very clear, I think multiple times, as far as wanting dollar for dollar at least cuts in expenses. We haven't gotten there yet. So when we get there, then we will have more to choose from. As I've said as well, if you give us just numbers on each side of the balance sheet, it cuts and, not balance sheet, but income statement, where you have cuts and you have revenues, but it totals the exact number you want, the board doesn't have a choice to make. If you give us more of each, now we can make those choices. Do we keep Pace Bus? Do we keep this? So that's what we want. We want to have choices. And that's what we're pushing for, and we'll continue to push for. Budgeting when everything is growing rapidly is a lot easier than budgeting when there's a fundamental shift in your economy, which is what we've walked into and had in the last 18 months. So thank you very much for coming tonight, and you guys can all get back to the Bears game. By the way, I did wear my Bears colors. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, we have an executive session.
We do not have an
Are we-
executive
did we
session
cancel
tonight.
it?
Yeah,
No.
Okay.
no need for
So,
it.
I
I'll
just
take-
wanted to make one
Yep.
quick comment.
Um,
The golf outing, I babysit on Tuesdays, but I did help
Oh, you
sponsor.
did? I wasn't
the
told that,
beverage
so
cart.
thank you very much for the sponsorship, so.
We did.
I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All against?
So this is my last meeting.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, brother.